You're watching the Comcast Network. CN100, Chicago.
Hello everyone, I'm Jim Blaney for CN100 Sports. Recently, Richards football coaching legend Gary Korhonen passed away at the age of 77. For 45 years, Coach Korhonen touched the lives of hundreds of students roaming the hallways at Richards High School in Oak Lawn. Shortly after his retirement, I had the pleasure of interviewing Gary, his family, friends, and colleagues about his coaching and teaching career. To honor his memory, please join us in taking a look back at our special from the fall of 2008. Korhonen, Nice Guys finished first. By appearance, there's not much to differentiate the high school football fields that dot the Illinois landscape. They all have grass, they all have lines, they all have stands, and there's usually a press box of some sort. The difference comes by what happens on these fields on Friday nights. Here in Oak Lawn, for the last 36 years, the Richards Bulldogs have taken to this field under their head coach Gary Korhonen, and the Bulldogs usually won. In fact, the 306 wins under Korhonen's charge makes him the winningest football coach in Illinois high school history. By themselves, those numbers were probably plenty to get this field named in Korhonen's honor. 36 years, 306 wins, 2 state football championships. But those numbers are the end result. They are not the full story of a coach who always put his players and their school first. In the next half hour, you'll meet Coach Gary Korhonen, his family, his friends, his players, and his colleagues that are all part of this amazing story. It's a story that proves nice guys finish first. The story of this South suburban coaching legend began on the north side of Chicago. Raised in a single-parent home, many times it was up to Gary to keep himself out of trouble in a rough neighborhood.
A lot of temptations and a lot of exposures to things that you wouldn't want your son or daughter to get into, and it was right there for me. And I can remember one night my sister and I were sleeping on the back porch on the first floor, and someone in a striptease place on Wilson Avenue, which is only a half a block down, was shot to death in the alley. We're in the same alley, and you know, if that was my family and your family, the next day we'd probably move. Where did we sleep the next night? Out on the back porch, because it was 95 out. We didn't have air conditioning.
Gary managed to stay out of trouble, excelling on the football field for Amundsen High School. It was there that he first came across Grant Blaney, a young assistant coach who would become a lifelong mentor and friend.
I owe that man everything, because without him I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you right now. He's just a great, great influence.
The thing I recall about Gary is that for a young 17-year-old kid, he was very serious about learning as much as he could about the fundamentals of football, and he was like a sponge as far as soaking up everything I would say to him. He felt, you know, that was part of his responsibility, to learn as much as he could.
You know, he was really the first father figure I ever had in my life, you know, and I just, and I don't even think Grant ever knew that at the time, you know, but I knew it.
I tell all the young coaches this day and age, in that what you say to young people, as insignificant as you may think it is, or you don't think about what you're saying at the time, in many cases that stays with them for a lifetime. So choose your words, you know, very carefully and intelligently.
Gary's hard work on the gridiron for Amundsen led him somewhere no one else in his family had gone before, to college, thanks to a scholarship offer from Upper Iowa University.
I wanted to go to college, but I didn't, and I mean, it just wasn't the thing to do in my family. No one that had ever been there, and so at the last minute, they had the scholarship dangling in front of me, and I decided that I would go there. And I can remember my grandfather not even wanting to talk to me because I dared go away to college and not go out and get a job and help my mother. She was so supportive of it. She was just proud to have somebody in college.
After finishing a stellar career on the field for the Peacocks, Gary moved into the world of education, taking a teaching job at Central Community High School in Elkader, Iowa. That's also where, for the first time, he became Coach Korhonen, taking over a struggling varsity football program.
It was a basketball school. They won something like 2 games in 3 years. In my first year there, we were 3-5. The second year, we won the conference. And that was the first conference that they had won in a long time.
Despite experiencing success coaching in Iowa, Korhonen's destiny was waiting for him in a southern suburb of Chicago. In the fall of 1965, Oak Lawn's Richards High School opened its doors for the first time. Along with the brand new student body was a brand new history teacher named Gary Korhonen. After 6 seasons working with the lower level teams, Coach Korhonen took over the Richards varsity squad in the fall of 1972. He immediately went to work laying the foundation on which the program would stand for the next 36 years.
At that time, he was younger, he was aggressive, he was tough. You played that way or you bear the consequences at that time. So it was a situation where I'd say in his case it was hard work, discipline, and a true passion for football. And if you didn't carry that passion out, then you would suffer the consequences.
Let me put it this way. He wasn't a lovable guy, but we played for him, and he'd say, "Go ahead, quit. Come on, Cass, quit." I can hear him saying it to this day. I can't thank him enough for that. He instilled in us the inability to quit. And I've used that every day of my life.
Not only was he a very good coach, he was also one that basically imparted to you a lot of wisdom as far as life was concerned. So the effort that you put forward, the passion, the desire, the dedication. And I think one word that he always talked about was discipline. All of those things were extremely important in building the football program and all things that helped me a great deal in my career.
I'm working here at the Tribune. I don't have the pedigree. I didn't go to the big journalism school. My daddy's wasn't the publisher of the Washington Post to get me a job. Like every Richards kid who played for Gary Korhonen, we came up on the other side of that town, on the south side, and he taught us not to quit. And I'll never, ever, ever thank him enough for that.
As the Richards football program began to blossom, so did romance between a young coach named Gary Korhonen and a young teacher named Eileen McGrath.
She was very good friends with Kathleen Murphy at that point in time, now Kathleen Salvatore.
She and I were first-year teachers, and her father was the head football coach, so we became fast friends, and over the years we would always go to the Richards games because her dad was the coach. Then Gary became head coach, and afterwards we would get together at parties and things like that, and I taught at the same building, and that's how we met, and then, I don't know, it just kind of happened.
I knew she was the one for me, but I just never, ever, could visualize myself, getting married.
Ed Murphy told Kathy Salvatore and I, be sure, don't marry a football coach. Whatever you do, do not marry. And we both ended up doing so. I'm not sure both of us knew what we were getting in for. I do know that when we did get married, I don't think it was in his plan that we were going to have kids or a house or things like that, but he finally came around.
At about the same time Gary and Eileen's relationship was beginning to bloom, a long-time coaching relationship also began between Gary and Frank Salvatore.
We were joined at the hip in 1971. He started teaching here. I was at the lower levels in those days. We coached a freshman team, and the following year, I got the varsity job, of course, and so we worked together for 37 years.
Gary and I always argue, and he always wins because he's the boss. But we've had a lot of great times and a lot of success. So, in fact, I was his godfather for his youngest daughter, so we became very close.
And he always had that sixth sense about whether to go for it, not go for it, do this, do that. And I can remember one night we played Oak Lawn out here, and there was a power failure in Oak Lawn. Everything was shut down, and we're midway through the third quarter. It was the last game of the regular season, and we're ahead 14-0. So they were talking about coming back the next day and finishing the game up, which we want to do. And Frank says, let's go over to Eisenhower and call them and see if they got lights. He says, we can't do that. Next thing I knew, people are calling Eisenhower, sure, come on over. So we drove the 2 buses and finished the game over there at 1:20.
The bond between coaches was not uncommon on any Korhonen staff.
I think what you have to have with a coaching staff to be successful, I've always had the philosophy, no one ever works for me, we work with each other.
I've never seen a coach, and I've worked with coaches throughout the state of Illinois in all different sports. I've never seen a coach be so good at delegating authority and letting his assistants have an impact on the program. Gary Korhonen is totally selfless.
I've always called him the greatest delegator in the history of high school football for that reason. He's had some great assistants, and he lets them coach a lot of the game. I can particularly remember one assistant crew he had with Bill Porter, John Rutkowski, and of course Frank Salvatore, who's been with him all the way to the finish. Gary was sort of the godfather of this group, and they were three of the most knowledgeable football men I've ever seen, at least at the high school level.
There's very little change here as far as the staff. Once they come on board, they stay for a long time. A lot of his staff members have been here 15, 16, 14 years. They stayed loyal to him. They stayed loyal to the program.
That loyalty would be tested in 1984 as a teacher's strike threatened the possibility of a football season.
That teacher strike in '84 was just devastating. I could see my career passing before me. That was just the testimony of Frank and I working together, and Bill Porter and John Rutkowski, of just, boy, if you ever learned about family, that was the time right there, because our spirits was such a low ebb. And ironically, they did settle the strike with 4 games to go, and you know who we played first? It was Grant Blaney and Buffalo Grove. 2
years later, by his actions and his words, Grant Blaney would once again inspire Korhonen. In 1985, the Richards football team began what would become 23 years of consecutive playoff appearances. While Gary Korhonen's success was just beginning, his friend and mentor Grant Blaney was reaching the pinnacle of his coaching career as his Buffalo Grove team captured a state title in 1986, after which the teacher had some inspiring words for the student.
They were rolling out the podium, and he was up on top, and I went down there, looked up with those worshiping eyes, you know, and I said, Grant Blaney, Coach Grant Blaney, congratulations. You know, I'm just so happy for him. I'm just really proud of you. And he didn't hesitate 1 second. He looked down at me, pointed his finger down, and he says, Gary, live your dreams. You'll be up here someday. And I'm thinking to myself, thanks, Coach. But inside I'm thinking, yeah, right. You know, and then 2 years later I was.
Korhonen's 1987 squad capped off 3 straight 10-win seasons for the Bulldogs. Then in 1988, led by quarterback Ephraim Haymore, Richards ran the table, going 14-0, bringing home the program's first state championship. In Coach Korhonen's opinion, the turning point of the season may have come all the way back in a Week 2 matchup versus Simeon.
So it was a 0-0 game. So we kicked off to them in the second half, and this quarterback comes and he pulls a play action, and the guy's running down the field. I think Brittany was the tight end, and Brittany's running down the field. He's open by 20 yards. The quarterback throws the ball, and he drops the ball. Well, anyway, we go on to win that game 12-0. But I always wondered, in the back of my mind, this little voice said, what if that guy would have caught that pass in that game? How would our season have turned out?
A game full of what-ifs awaited Korhonen and the Bulldogs in the 1989 state final against Dan Darlington and the Morris Redskins.
Well, what I remember the most about it was the Chicago papers had touted them as the best team ever in the state of Illinois. People in the paper were saying it'd be a 5-touchdown game.
The first 13 games, we just won very handily over everybody, just demolished everybody. Now all of a sudden we're in a ball game.
That first 59 minutes of the game was just back and forth, back and forth.
6-6 state championship. We're driving down the length of the field. We get down for the last play of the last play of the game, and we're on about inside of Morris's 10-yard line, maybe about the 8th.
12 seconds left to go. Avoid that overtime. This is where they make the big bucks, right? Yeah, exactly.
It was windy that night. I remember now. It was blowing from one end to the other.
It was a 40-mile-an-hour wind blowing. It might have been, I could exaggerate, say, but it was a 40-mile-an-hour wind.
They had a big tight end. I can't recall his name, but he ran a flag pattern to the corner of the end zone.
And John Rutkowski was a great quarterback for us. Goes back to pass.
It's coming right down here. 7 seconds left. Second down and 15 back of the 20. Rutkowski.
My goal was to drop back, throw it up as deep and as far as I could with the hopes of one of our receivers coming down with it.
And he sees Johnny Newton in the end zone. He throws this transcontinental across the way. Well, it gets hung up on the wind. It becomes a wounded duck.
It most certainly got caught up in the wind. It most certainly was a wounded duck. And unfortunately, it was intercepted.
Rutkowski. It's intercepted away from Newton.
My safety jumps up, picks it on him, and he takes off streaking down the sideline.
They could take it all the way.
So my guess was someone's going to tackle him.
There's just masses over there. Pretty soon
he broke through the first wave, broke through the second wave.
That's right.
20, the 30, the 40.
made it through the third wave.
Wright gets a block.
The 50, the 40, all of a sudden it boils down to about 2 or 3 people.
He could go.
Before I knew it was me and our tailback, Arthur Russell, chasing him down. I thought Arthur Russell had the angle on him. Unfortunately, he actually got past Artie Russell.
It's our quarterback, John Rakowski, versus Mike Wright, and John Rakowski knocks him out of bounds.
Grabbed a hold of him, held on to him for dear life, and made sure I got him out of bounds before he reached that end zone.
Rakowski slows him down and takes him out of bounds.
So he returned that 93 yards plus from the end zone, and that was the end of regulation right there.
We're not through yet.
Tom, could you ask for a better football game than what we're watching here in the 4A championship?
After a few minutes to regroup, the teams headed to an overtime that was filled with as much tension and excitement as the final play of regulation. Richards got the ball first.
Our coaches called a 35 bootleg pass, which was one of our better plays and plays that we would run on the goal line.
The ball just outside the 2-yard line, 3rd and goal.
I remember calling the play in huddle, getting the guys kind of riled up, get them excited. It was 3rd down. It's overtime. We wanted to score.
Newton wide right, Ryan slot right.
Called the play. Ball was snapped. As the ball was snapped, I did my fake to our running back on a 35 boot. As I turned around, I looked, and my offensive guard, who typically is going to lead the way and block for me, had tripped.
Backs are in an aisle. Rutkowski's rolling out.
As I looked, I saw the defensive end or linebacker, whoever it was, coming at me. So I made a slight stutter step outside, broke outside into the perimeter.
Rutkowski's rolling out, being chased.
I shot for the orange cone, and I guess the rest was history. I hit the cone, and we scored and went up 12-6.
Headed for the corner. He made it. He made it. Touchdown.
That's the play I was looking for earlier in the football game, because Rakowski has great speed, and he just beat the corner.
Now it was time for the Redskins to do what they did best, play some smash-mouth football. But something unusual happened on the way to the end zone.
We go power eye left. We got our whole team on the left side of the ball. And I got Nazar Baftieri, our running back, and I'm going to run him off tackle to the left. Richards doesn't even move. They stay in their base defense. They got 2 guys over here. I got 6.
Power eye backfield for Morris.
One of their linemen jumps offside.
Penalty markers throws. Somebody was across the neutral zone.
Now it goes back to 1st and 15. I call timeout. I go out there. Look, they're going to throw the ball.
It's 1st and goal from the 15.
And now you've got to throw the ball.
And we come back and we call a screen to tailback Nazar.
They haven't had a whole lot of success being able to throw the ball.
I had 3 blockers. It was perfectly set up. I had 3 blockers out in front of him.
Darlington throws it by Baftieri, who may have been looking where he was running before he had the football.
Exactly right.
And John rolls to his left, turns and throws back right, hits Nazar right in the hands, and he drops it.
And he had 3 good-sized linemen right out in front of him.
That right then and there, I thought, you know, I don't think God is going to let us win this game no matter what we do.
After sure-handed Mike Wright let a pass go off his face mask, an unlikely hero emerged for the Bulldogs on 3rd down.
There's a young man by the name of Chad Randick. Chad Randick, as a freshman, was a 5'5" and couldn't walk and chew bubble gum as a freshman. Mike Wright's in the corner of this end zone. Darlington goes back. Johnny throws back the pass.
Looking for Wright.
Our corner was covered and fell down, and Chad was free, and this guy's right in the end zone, and all of a sudden his body comes flying through there, blam, and knocks it down.
Looking for Wright. Tipped away at the last moment by Chad Randick.
You know, that guy started out at 5'5" the year before and couldn't walk and chew bubble gum. Saved our state championship.
As success continued to grow for the Richards football program, the Korhonen family continued to grow as well. While Gary Korhonen was reaching the heights as a football coach for Richards High School, he was also reaching new levels of happiness at home as he and his wife Eileen brought 3 children into the world, Kelly, Katie, and Chris. Gary wasted no time in turning them all into little Bulldogs.
He involved the family in the pep assemblies, the bringing them to the games, to bringing the kids down on the sidelines. The girls were cheerleaders. This was something that the whole family was involved in. We lived Richards football. He really tried to be around as much as he could. He was always there for them, and I think if you ask the kids one thing, that Dad was always there for him. And he was their #1 fan too.
As Gary tried to get his family more involved with football, he continued to make his football players feel like family.
He's a father to some of these kids. With Gary, it was more than X's and O's. It's how you're going to live the rest of your life and how you can use football to get you to where you go out in society and compete as a gentleman, as a fighter. He's the best teacher I've ever seen.
Once you're a good teacher like he is, and you get the kids on your side, and the kids like you, and that makes your job so much easier, and that's what got him coming back year after year after year. I know it did.
His love for the game and his love for his players, that was very evident. You know, I really believe to be a good football coach, you need to know the game, but you also need to just really care about your players, and he did. He always wanted what was best for them.
At the end of my playing, the day after the season ended, I got all these letters from a bunch of colleges willing to talk to me about giving me a ride. The reason they did that was because Coach Korhonen sought them out and tried to fit me with their program. And he didn't have to do that. And if you look at his record, you'll see that he does that for as many kids as he can.
Coach Korhonen did for me what he does for every player that plays for him. He did absolutely everything he could to get me to the best school possible. There's no one out there better or who works harder to get his players into schools.
He's changed a lot of lives with kids out of Richards High School, and for this we're real proud.
Eileen could not have been more proud than she was in the fall of 2004 when father and son faced off in the state playoffs.
Chris Korhonen was the starting cornerback and long and short snapper for Providence Catholic, and Gary Korhonen had his team, and we met in the quarterfinals.
It was quiet. Normally the guys would sit down and they'd be watching films together and you know, commenting about practice, but there was a lot of tension in the house that week.
He was going down the stairs on that Friday, and he and I did the knuckle fight. We didn't even look at each other. Good luck, and then that was about 6:30 in the morning, and then 12 and a half hours later, the next time I saw him, he's lined up about 6 feet from me on the wide out.
So there's no question I would be cheering for Chris because I wanted him to win his own ring. Gary had 2, Chris had none, and so I was going to be there for Chris. But I had never cheered against a Bulldog before. So it was I really was very mixed on that.
I know he was on the sidelines. I knew I was playing against Richards, so in a way it was very difficult.
I would be less than honest with you if I were to say, let's try. We tried him once or twice, you know, he'd overthrew the ball, and Chris would come right up and get in your face. And I remember screaming at the official, he's holding, and he threw a flag. And Matt told me about that afterwards. That's kind of a unethical way to get things done out there, you know.
I remember De'Aaron Foster ran a thing over there, and he had bounced it to the outside, and actually I came up and I missed with about 8 other guys from Providence. We all missed the tackle. I thought, you know, I wonder who's gonna get me worse on this one. You know, my dad over there, my coaches at Providence.
You know, we lost the game, and I had the kids line up, and I look out there, there's no Providence team. And all of a sudden, this #1 walks out to the middle of the field, you know, and my wife was crying and everything, you know. And anyway, I walked out, you know, and it was a very touching moment between the two of us because Matt says, go on out there and meet your dad, you know. It was cool. It was really great.
The following fall, the whole family would be on the same side, cheering for their father on a field with a familiar name. By the fall of 2005, Gary Korhonen had already coached his way to 2 state championships and nearly 300 wins in the state of Illinois. Unbeknownst to him, another accomplishment was coming the night of the Richards annual Black and Gold scrimmage game.
And I had no idea what was happening, none. I mean, I was shocked. And I'm always the last to get out of the locker room for that game. I want to make sure everybody's got the water out and this and that, you know. And I walk upstairs, and the sun was shining in my eyes, and I see these just hundreds of people there. I'm thinking, well, what's going on? And then Eileen is always on time, but she's always there right at the start. And, you know, she's there like about, you know, a half hour early, 25 minutes early. I thought, this is really strange. And then I see my kids there, and a couple of my kids came home from college, you know, they were there. And I see my principal there, and I see the superintendent there. I said, what is going on here? You know, And then all of a sudden, we had the ceremony. I mean, I probably, I teared a little bit because it was just a shock, that happened.
I'm just so glad that they did this now so that everybody can enjoy it, and I hope future players there will know who Gary Korhonen was, and that he was an integral part of the school, the team, and helped develop a really successful program.
Gary Korhonen is Richards football, and as the scoreboard will always show, this is Korhonen Field.
2 seasons later, another Korhonen milestone, as Gary earned Illinois coaching win number 301, surpassing his friend Matt Sefner of Providence Catholic as the state's winningest football coach.
Yeah, if you're going to get passed up, you're going to get passed up by the best, and that's Gary. He's right there. He works so hard at it. He works so hard at it, and you're not going to deny a coach that works hard at it and gets the kids playing for him. It's going to happen.
Despite putting in so many years and so much hard work, it was still surprising in early 2008 when Gary Korhonen announced his retirement. As usual, the team played a factor in his decision-making.
I always told my wife when I was going to retire I wouldn't decide until January because I wanted things in place. And those things were, we had 14 commits this year from our seniors. I wanted to make sure that our seniors were covered going in there, from Tommy Thomas at Purdue all the way down to College of DuPage and Juliet JC. So that was taken care of. Our weightlifting at that point in time was just getting record numbers. And aside from that, we had won the conference at the freshman, sophomore, and varsity level. So things were set there. And then personally, this group of seniors this year was just a very special group to me. It was a very reluctant, hard decision, and it's still agonizing to me somewhat, but I know I made the right decision.
One more coaching honor was bestowed upon Korhonen in the summer of 2008, as Gary was named the National High School Association's Coach of the Year at their national convention in Colorado Springs. The award added another chapter to the Korhonen legacy.
He's always here. People will ask, describe him. When you get here at 7 in the morning, he's already been here for 3 hours. And then when you leave at night, he's still here. So he's built the school in terms of the athletic program. It's his. It's Gary Korhonen.
It was always fun to go and scout Richards or watch Richards, or when we'd be scouting the opponent. I'd always find myself checking out what Gary would do in between talking with Eileen or one of the family members, just because I knew the excitement and the energy he generated for those kids.
After Friday night games, we had film sessions. If you weren't here by 8, you weren't dressing next week. And he sat there with his phone, his clock right there. If you walked in at 8:00 and 1 second late, you weren't dressing next week. It taught you that responsibility and accountability that, hey, it's just like a job. You got to be on time.
Here's a football coach that when the day is done, he's in the locker room sweeping it out. And in fact, after every football game, he went to the same laundromat in Oak Lawn each weekend, and he did the laundry himself. He's not too big, he's not too important to do the most menial job on the football program.
I'm not 100% sure he's going to stay out of it completely. Old coaches never die. They just look for different ways to get another 1st and 10.
But as I said before, the legacy it's not all about me, it's about the people I work with, because without the coaching staff, I would be nothing. And without Grant Blaney, I wouldn't be here. And without my wife, there's no way I would have been as successful as I was. So I have a lot of people in the wings there. But the other thing is, if there is a legacy of Gary Korhonen, I would hope it would be for the 285 kids that I've helped get in college, and also the other hundreds that I've helped.
We hope you enjoyed our look back at the life and legacy of Coach Gary Korhonen. Besides his tireless work on the football field, Gary was a wonderful husband, father, grandfather, and friend. He will be missed.